Welcome to Your Nonprofit Power, where we talk about everything nonprofit leadership. And we are helping you, fearless nonprofit leaders out there, build a sustainable and stress free fundraising model so you can do the important work of changing the world and making it better for all of us. And after the week we're having again and again, you know how important it is that we are helping each other become successful. I am excited to invite and welcome our guests today, our representatives from Wipfli, who are helping organizations globally with strategic planning and leadership development and financial services to talk about what the heck is going out there and the demands on nonprofits and how we're pivoting and evolving and owning our power. Because that's what we're about here on Your Nonprofit Power, is owning our power as change makers. So join me as we welcome our guests today, Kate and Jeffrey. I'm welcoming to them to the stage. Good to see you. Good to be with you today.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Good morning. Good to
Thanks.
see you again.
Thanks for joining, Kate and Jeffrey. I'm excited for you to share with our group. Folks might be joining us from all over the world. And of course, if you want to leave a comment, you're going to make sure that we can see your name by hitting the streamyard.com/Facebook or /LinkedIn, depending on where you're joining from. Jeffrey, Kate, welcome to the show. You've been working with nonprofits a long time. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
We are too.
We are very much as well.
Tell me a little bit about your background in nonprofits, and maybe we can just take turns. And then Wipfli, also your work at Wipfli, and what you're most excited about happening there.
For sure. Kate, do you want to go first?
I sure can. I'm Kate Atkins, and I've been with Wipfli for just over 12 years, always in our nonprofit government and education group. Most of my clients are actually large federally funded nonprofits. My background educationally is in fundraising, and it's a whole different group, a whole different culture for those folks. But it's so exciting to see them learning about fundraising and the strategy that's attached to it. I've also been on boards for 20 years. I've been board chair for a while, and I'm still on the board of Heartland Farm Sanctuary. We've gone from, 2 animals to getting our first $1 million check over the 10 years. So it's been quite a period of growth.
That's amazing.
Lots of struggles, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, to go from the federally funded world, which is its own animal, right? Its own culture, with their own opportunities, and then to be on the ground with nonprofits in that board leadership role to see that success. Very great to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Jeffrey Pradas, I have been in the nonprofit sector since 1989, which is when I got my first full-time job. So it's been 30 years, give or take a few. And I started out in direct service. I spent the first half of my career actually working in nonprofits, a variety of nonprofits, excuse me, in Utah, California, New York, and then ultimately here in Minneapolis. And really thought that that's where my future was going to take me. My goal in life was to be an executive director of a nonprofit, specifically a nonprofit summer camp, because I thought, what better way to spend my time than, at the lake or the beach with, hundreds of kids and make a difference in their lives. But I got onto a different path. And so I spent 20 years building my career in different aspects of nonprofit management, everything from room setup and maintenance to programming to marketing, fundraising, and ultimately executive management, having the pleasure of running a couple of organizations. I then pivoted my career and went into consulting, and I had my own regional boutique nonprofit consulting firm. Where we did work with small, medium, and large organizations. I spent time working in the faith community and human services, social services, national parks, education, the arts, and really developed a love for so many different sectors of work that's being done in nonprofits, including really small startups, as well as the large federally funded, like Kate mentioned. Had the benefit of coming to Wipfli a little over 2 years ago, where I am a consultant in our nonprofit government and education group, and lead a lot of our strategic planning for nonprofit organizations of all of our, whether they're community-based organizations or federally funded organizations. And then we're also building out new services in philanthropic advisory services, where we're helping organizations position themselves really for great success in a post-pandemic world of how the heck do we get the resources that we need. So it's an exciting time. Love the work I do. Love Wipfli. Really enjoy working with Kate. And yeah, that's a little bit about us.
Guys, I love hanging out with you. That is, you get to do some of the coolest work, and I love the breadth and depth of what you're bringing to the industry, right? All around.
Yeah, Wipfli really allows us the space to meet our clients where they're at, delivering sort of the services and things that they need, as opposed to what we necessarily think is best. So we always try to meet our clients where they're at. So we custom design everything for their particular situation, as opposed to saying this one size fits all methodology works for all organizations, whether or not you're a $100 million federally funded organization or you're a $5 million community-based organization. Those are two different types of organizations, and we're fortunate enough to have the latitude to be able to serve both.
Yeah, that is unusual out there, I will say, being in the industry. And I love the different issues and topics that you're supporting organizations in with that flexibility too, as you said before, the wide array. Well, listen, I ask all our guests this, and I try to be really consistent with this. We talk a lot about fearless fundraising. You mentioned philanthropic programming, and I just want to clarify, by philanthropic programming, are you helping foundations deliver funding, or are you helping organizations raise money? What do you mean by that?
What we're trying to do is position organizations to be able to have successful fundraising operations. So what that means is we'll go in and we'll do feasibility and campaign planning and training.
You're helping the fundraiser.
Yeah, we're helping organizations be in a position to secure the resources that they need when they don't.
Yeah, sure. Fundraising and the infrastructure that goes with it. I just wasn't sure if you were helping the foundations, because I think that they need help too, Jeffrey.
Yeah, we are actually helping foundations. We're helping a number of foundations get off the ground and get set up. And then we're also in a position to help evaluate
how we're helping. Let's jump in. And here's my question I love to ask and kind of set the tone, and why I love working with you guys. We've met, Kate and I met about a year ago, and we met at a conference, a federally funded programming type of conference for the CAP, Pennsylvania Community Action Association. And that's how we first connected, and we just vibed, right? Like
yes, we did.
Our creative way of looking at things, like we can geek out on the how.
Yeah, I was gonna say we kind of geek out on the same kind of things. So
the vibe in that we really are about helping nonprofits tap into their strengths, meet them where they are, and really take off. I love that. So here's the question, and why I just feel you're great guests on the show is, what does it mean to be a fearless fundraiser? How would you answer that?
Well, for me, it starts with not being apologetic. I think there's a lot of folks in fundraising, especially those that are starting out in fundraising, that find the need to sort of apologize for it, right? There are folks in this world that want to give to your organization. I like to say they just don't know it yet. And it's your job, right, to connect their passions to your needs. And so to be fearless like that is to really look that in the face and embrace it. It's being proud of the work that you're doing. It's valuing the organization that you represent, or the cause, or whatever it is that you're trying, whether it's selling Girl Scout cookies, or you're raising money to cure cancer, or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's embracing that and giving yourself 100% to what it is that you're doing, because I think authenticity in the activity of asking people for money or in-kind gifts or support is one of those things that, especially today, I think most people are able to see through. If they feel they're being transacted, then there's less likelihood of them becoming a lifelong supporter. Whereas if you're authentic in your belief of what you're actually asking them to invest in rather than give to, then I think you have a much greater likelihood of developing a donor, an investor for life than you are just to get that first check. So for me, it's embracing it. It's taking it on head first, and it's just really being authentic in the development of the relationship that you have to that perspective or that existing donor.
We need like a hell yeah buzzer. I need for the next show.
Well, and
Jeff,
to be fearless, it's all about passion. It's all about finding the passion in other people and what fires them up. And the greatest piece of advice I got that made me much more fearless was that no is a blessing. If someone says no, take that as the best thing. It's not going to ruin your day. Don't feel bad about yourself. It's them saying my passions are elsewhere. And then focusing on others who really are on fire about what you're working on.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Kate, because when I was developing my chops in fundraising, a mentor of mine said to me, turn it into a game, right? Figure out how many no's it takes to get to your next yes, and then just check them off the list. So if it was like, if you said no to me, I said, thank you. I'm one step closer to getting that yes. And I
love that.
Yeah, I just worked my job. I worked my cause. I worked my purpose. And, if I said to you, hey, did you like that movie that you went to on Saturday night? And they said no, it wouldn't hurt me, right? So if they say no to me, it just means that my movie doesn't match their interests, and that's okay.
Yeah, and our job is
totally fine.
And our job isn't to convince anybody to care. It's to find the people who do and give them.
Absolutely. I think the challenge with a lot of
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think the challenge with a lot of fundraisers is, unfortunately, we're put in the box of chasing bottom lines. And so we have targets and goals, and we have a goal that we have to hit. And unfortunately, I think there's that transactional nature where we're looking at prospects.
I call it goal trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, don't worry. I've always told people that I work with, don't worry about the money. If you work the plan and you do your work and you're authentic about it, and you do the right level of activity, the money will take care of itself.
And we don't have capacity to
right.
keep going after people who aren't passionate.
Exactly.
We certainly every day we're having less and less capacity to do that. So
right. Keep it focused on the work.
It's in our focus too, it sounds like you're saying.
Well, I think that's you hit it on the head, Amy. It's fearless fundraising, and it's fearless and be focused. It's staying on your goal, right? But your goal is to fund a cause, or your focus is to, we need to build a building, or we need to buy a building. It's not how much we need, it's we need to do it. So if you focus on that passion and you do the right work, and you've got a good plan, and you work that plan, and you adjust that plan based on what you're learning, then you'll hit your goal. Again, people don't want to feel transacted. They need to feel transformed, which I think is the key when you're dealing with fundraising.
Well, Riley's excited. You can hear my dog cheering for you. That would be the hell yeah button. It'll just be Riley barking though instead.
That works for me.
That's better.
That's fantastic. I like that even better.
You're that inspiring. So here's the thing. I love this conversation around being fearless, because we do need to encourage our army of fearless leaders out there, because their work is more important than ever. But there are days like today. We were chatting before the show for a minute. There are days and weeks like today, and sometimes we feel like we're saying this week after week, where I know we need to be fierce and fearless, but sometimes it's hard. It's hard in the face of the constant need and demand. And we're going on years and years of this pace. And in the nonprofit sector, let's just be honest, diversity, equity, inclusion aren't new. Trauma is not new in our everyday. Like, this is, nonprofit leaders have been burning the midnight oil for generations to begin with. And now it just seems amplified. And what do you say to your tribe of leaders? What do you say to that? We're going to help you fix the systems, but we also recognize that you're in the face of this day in and day out. How does that feel for your leaders right now? And what do you say to them?
Yeah, I think everybody's exhausted. I think the last 3 years took a toll. I think that every system has been stressed. to the point of breaking. We hear it all the time. The Great Resignation, as we heard on the headlines, has impacted nonprofits equally, if not more, to our friends in the corporate and business world. We find nonprofits are operating in many cases at 85, 80, even 75% of staffing capacity, which adds stress and strain to the system because there's not 20 to 25% less work. There's just fewer people that are able to execute on that work. And so it's really providing folks with a lot of stress. We're recommending a couple of things to organizations. Number one, and Wipfli is a perfect example of this. Our industry lead, Kathleen Dubois, reminds us of this all the time in our nonprofit government and education work, and that is that you cannot work 150% of the time. You have got to maintain you're no good to anybody if you're not good to yourself. And so we are always recommending to organizations that they take a beat, a pause, that people take time to center and balance themselves. But then at the same time, how does that work for staff, right? So trying to get people to take that time to recharge and re-energize. But then when it comes to the work of the team, right? It's important for us to make sure that we're allowing our full teams their full ability and potential to help ourselves. So we talk about it in strategic planning a lot, right? Delegate the work to elevate the results. We talk about it that way because more often than not, leaders tend to close the vest and keep things to themselves and pile on that work because, we don't have somebody to do that, or it's better if I get it done myself, or whatever it might be. And so we keep that circle really small. There are people in our organizations that want to lean in and step up, right? Especially where there are openings and vacancies in organizations. There are people that want to plot a new career path and elevate their work by leaning into projects and processes and things that they might not have been able to do otherwise. So one of the things that we work on with our talent and culture folks is how do we put stuff in a perspective where an entire organization gets engaged around the work that they're doing, as opposed to just being in their traditional silos. I work in this program, so I can't think or worry about something else. So what we're trying to do is get leaders to expand their perspective, reach beyond those silos. I call it silos to circles. I want circles in organizations where there's overlap, right? Where resources can be helpful outside of their traditional roles, which provides a lot of flexibility, a little bit of ease of strain on the system. And by the way, that's where you find your next generation of leaders. Who is it that's going to lean in, elevate their work, take responsibility, show that they're the right people going forward into the future?
So, and that's great. And there are ways to do that, right? There are structural and system ways to do that. And we're going to talk about it. The leaning in, it's curious because when there is that confusion and chaos of roles and people not stepping up, it can be easier for us to see one of those possibilities is there's lack of clarity, right? Lack of clarity and more focus on the how we're doing things and not the goals of what we're accomplishing that would really allow people the freedom to achieve those goals in their own ways in some cases, right? But it's interesting. I'm working with a couple of boards right now, and this lack of clarity, and even as it shakes out in the financials, right? Because all of those goals and all of those ideas shake out in a good financial report. Some of the kickback I'll hear about is this is simply going to get us more in our silos. If we clarify and delineate, and yeah, we're thinking about it in circles, but the fact is we're being specific about goals, program goals, financial goals, and that feels like that might divide us more. Have you ever gotten that in the effort of addressing silos? Do you ever get comments like that, or leaders who are concerned that by clearly delineating goals, it will further divide people versus bring them together? What's the fear around setting goals? Because I think there is a lot of, I don't know how to do it, but when you talk to folks, it's hard putting numbers and goals on paper.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a I think that's the critical part of strategic planning, right? It's goal setting, it's identifying key performance indicators and key results and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I actually I don't know that I think I find that clarity actually provides opportunity. I think people, and Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that people crave clarity. I think when things are clear, I think they're able to, I think they're able to step up. I think they can see. I mean, if leaders do their jobs right, it's not about creating clarity for the purpose of keeping people where they're at, but I think it's about clarity. What we find is that a lot of organizations that operate in silos, their staffs feel like they don't understand their role and place in the organization and their impact. And so that clarity can actually have that opposite effect, right?
When you're working
clarity,
with others to define the clarity.
The clarity actually.
That's what I'm talking about. I get where staff doesn't have the clarity.
Yeah. So leaders have to be trained. We have to tell leaders that clarity doesn't divide our organization. Clarity brings it together.
And clarity also doesn't limit your ability to make moves. I think sometimes more of our entrepreneurial clients feel like this is going to handcuff me. This is going to limit my ability to be creative. And in fact, you know, for the last 30 years, my experience is it expands your ability to be creative. That's my experience.
And I think the clarity is so important for being creative, for loving your job, for seeing your purpose. And I think the last few years, there just hasn't been clarity for clearly COVID reasons, et cetera. So that's some of the exhaustion. I think we're just tired because we don't know, things aren't clear exactly how they're going to move forward.
And to that point, Amy, I'm working with two organizations, one in Wisconsin, one in California right now, where we're having this very conversation because there's a disconnect internally and externally about roles and responsibilities. And it's quite interesting because the leaders are telling us they want to hear what our partners, our funders, our volunteers are saying about our organization, what their expectations are versus what the organization's expectations are. And where there's a disconnect, it provides a great opportunity for that conversation. And in both of these groups, what I've heard is if I understand more, right, I'm going to be able to do my job better, and I'm going to be able to be a better ambassador, not only for the work I'm doing, but for the entire work of the agency. And so I think what we're hearing, I think what we're finding, especially post-pandemic, is a newfound openness by leaders to say, we have real problems to solve. I'm not sure I have all the answers, but I have a really good team around me, and I've got really good people that want to help me. So I'm going to listen more than just simply install certain systems or concepts or processes. We're going to make this a more collective experience. We're going to gain that insight and wisdom from people outside of our leadership teams to help inform those decisions. So I think a good leader is one that listens and then adapts and responds, pairing their knowledge with what they're learning.
Yeah, I think that's true. So there was a lot. I want to back up a little bit. I agree with you. I'm hearing more people reach out, not for programming or individual or one-off support, but more than I have in my 10 years of consulting, people reaching out directly to move into strategic planning. Some people are looking for strategic planning at the start, putting out RFPs. I'm seeing at different size organizations, they're investing differently at those things. I also think there's some movement in how people are moving money that is allowing leaders to take more bold steps. So I think that there's, again, there's a lever on that side as well.
Yeah. And that's going to be, and I think, oh yeah, go ahead.
But because I think you said a couple of things really interesting, and I want to jump in there on that.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I think they're craving the clarity. I mean, right? That's one of the pain points we're all selling to, right? They're confused, they're cluttered, and they can acknowledge it. That is important first step, right? The work, as you said earlier, is the helping them transform as leaders to learn how to do it and deal with the emotional barriers that sometimes get in the way of being clear. I think everybody would agree being clear is the goal, but if it were easy for everybody, I think that's where we would be out of work.
Right. So don't.
It's a lot of therapy and a little bit of spreadsheets. I don't know.
It really is.
Sometimes my experience.
Oh no, absolutely. No, you're 100% right. You mentioned one thing that I wanted to touch on because I'm not sure it would come up otherwise. And that is, you talked about the differences and how people are moving money around and creating opportunities for organizations. You know, what's really interesting is that as we were coming out of the pandemic and there were millions of dollars being pumped into nonprofit organizations to do both mission and non-mission specific work, that created a lot of opportunity for organizations to become a little bit more innovative, a little bit more creative, and provide services that they may not have otherwise done. The challenge, Amy, is that as that money now goes away, as they're either spending it or it's not being renewed, or that federal money and state money that was finding its way to nonprofits in millions and millions of dollars is creating a financial cliff for a lot of organizations, where for the last 3 years, they've been able to staff positions, they've been able to provide services that have become really critical to their organization's operations, but now the funding is going away, which means they're either going to have to start cutting services and cutting people, or finding alternative ways of funding those programs going forward, where, you know, they weren't necessarily even looking for that money in the first place. We know a lot of nonprofits that got a call and said, hey, we're going to send you $1 million to do this program. And they were like, yeah, bring it on. Right.
Yep.
But now they're facing that cliff, which I think is going to present a really unique and potentially scary situation for nonprofits going forward.
And that is a result of COVID and this influx of wild money. I mean, I helped a client put a grant together in California for 6 figures for just capacity building, like truly like overhauling books, strategic. I mean, I've never written a grant like that in my 30 years, where it was just backroom operations for that kind of money. So it definitely, and of course that money is about to be gone altogether, as you said. And the services will back on the flip side. And I'm curious how you have seen this with your community, is they've also tapped into their confidence and their power. And I think, and if we can keep that moving forward, to be strong advocates, to keep the funding moving in this direction, that we have proven to ourselves now, we're not just a nice to have industry, what a $1 billion industry, the nonprofit sector. We actually are an essential frontline, critical to keeping up our values and our expectations for our communities and our society. So if they fight the good fight, you know, not individually, but we as nonprofit leaders stick together and say, we're not going back to the nickel and diming. We're not going to do your dirty work and be treated like this anymore. We will be your partner, right? And we will get the job done, and we will do better and focusing on results. But that's the shift that I hope will continue to, that ownership. It seems like, well, that's what you do. You build their confidence, right? You help them get clear on their message, on their goals. Are we going to sustain this confidence, knowing how important we are?
I think a lot of it's going to come with collaborating amongst ourselves, really seeing that we can use resources together. We can share resources and really honing in on our mission. So if, you know, there's 3 things we don't do that great, but another organization really does, and to really truly take ego out of it, look at who we are, what we are masters at, and then being willing to work together as a community to solve the problem, because there will be other organizations that are stellar at what you're kind of okay at.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that as an industry, nonprofits need to act in alignment with one another to elevate the value of our work and not be seen as, you know, well, it's that nonprofit, there are a lot of people that benefited from a lot of work being done by nonprofits across the spectrum of organizations and industries in the nonprofit sector. And I think we need to all come together and recognize that, because, we need to continually remind people how valuable our sector is in the lives of not just, the perception that it's, low income communities or whatever. We are serving folks from every community, at all levels, with all backgrounds, and that should be celebrated, and we should be doing it more together as a team.
We tell our community actions and Head Start
I was
programs,
just gonna
stop
say,
being
just gonna say
your
this.
community's best
Yeah.
kept secret. Like
Yeah.
they're humble, they're very good at compliance, they're very proud of what they do. But I mean, I've been in the nonprofit world since college, and I had no idea what a community
I
action
never.
was until I started at Whipfly.
Right.
That's, I
So
mean,
I
and
was
the
gonna say
number
that.
of people they serve is astronomical.
Well, let's explain this, Kate. That's where we met was CAP. I've
Yes.
been in CAP for a long time, actually, as CEO of a trade association in energy efficiency. I worked with the weatherization divisions
Okay.
nationally. And the CAPs are really interesting, federally funded ultimately. And they do a variety of things for the most vulnerable among us. Every county in the United States, virtually. I think it is county by county, nationally, but at the very least regionally, there are community action organizations that are providing weatherization services, making sure that houses and people are using less energy, affordable energy, food, making sure people are fed, and housing. Some of the three most important things are community
Yeah.
action organizations.
That and early education, early learning
Early
opportunities
education.
through Head Start, early Head Start.
And Head Start. And so at this conference, what we're seeing is in fundraising, it was never a focus because they had the federal dollars and they were able to sustain themselves. What we're seeing out there, and I don't think that was a good strategy even when that was true. And I hear that's what Kate's saying too. But now they have more need than ever, right? And COVID just showed how important it is. They have more need than ever, and their skill set in fundraising is at the very beginner. So I have three levels of fundraisers I work.
Yes.
I work with the hustler, the nonprofit hustler, and we know those guys are just scramble, scramble, scramble. The serial entrepreneur, who is a little more savvy in the alliances, right, building more partnerships, and the fearless fundraiser. What's interesting about CAPs and organizations is even though they are multi-million-dollar organizations, and I've worked for $20 million CAPs before, right? They can be very, very large, and they're still the hustler, though, right? They're still in that early, even though their budget is so big. So
one thing I found fascinating with my career and experience is these huge. I could have a $20 million CAP going through the same thing as Heartland Farm Sanctuary in Madison, Wisconsin.
Right. Exactly.
They're at the same level of capacity and knowledge, and I definitely see that.
It could be a 50, 70, $100 million in the same situation. One of the things, Amy, that you touch on, which is really important, and I think it's a distinction that needs to be made, is that the challenge for CAP organizations, and it's one that Whipfly's trying to be responsive to, because every year we hear that resource development is one of the top 3 or 4 needs expressed by nonprofit leaders, but it's one of the bottom 5 that are ever really acted upon, because the restrictions on their federal funding prevent them in many cases from doing fundraising like a traditional nonprofit would be able to do. Well, Kate, you can speak a little bit more to that, and I can speak to the way we're solving it. So maybe, Kate, why don't you answer that question?
I'm not a regulations expert, but I've sat through
into the weeds, but I am.
No, and it's not getting into the weeds, but
I think, especially with Head Start, and I know for CAPS as well, for the most part, you can't use federal funds to fundraise.
Sure.
So you have to have non-federal funds, unrestricted funds to fundraise. So how on earth do you get that, especially when all of your employees are amazing compliance people, but not your networkers,
Well, let me give you an example, because I think this is a really interesting point, and this is where CAPs and organizations need to ruthlessly prioritize their decisions. When I've worked with CAP organizations, and in the last 2 years, I worked with a housing organization where we doubled our revenue and went in politically and advocated for capital money that then led them to build a housing shelter, emergency shelter the community didn't have, doubled the revenue in 9 months. And here's the thing, when they would raise money, when they had that opportunity to raise money, what they would do is they would pour it back into the mission. And what I said was, that's their job to pay for that, right? Why are you paying for some of the executive director salary when that's all your time is going to supervise? So go back and advocate for some things. Sometimes it's regulation, but sometimes it's just a bunch of people making decisions, not knowing what it's like on the ground.
Sure. I think that's absolutely true. What we find,
you raise and invested in raising more versus right.
Absolutely. The challenge
is frustrating when you see leaders lose those opportunities because you know it's just going to be.
Absolutely. You're 100% right there. I think where Kate was going is that there are some real stringent restrictions on the use of those federal dollars. And unfortunately for CAP organizations, generally speaking, 90+% of their money is coming from these federal sources. And so they don't know where to get started. And the other piece, Amy, as you know, is that a lot of the folks that are hired into CAP organizations aren't fundraisers.
That's right.
They're not hiring development directors. They're not hiring those people. So the knowledge base isn't there. And you know that the boards of directors aren't fundraising boards of directors for CAP organizations. So what Wipfli's trying to do is develop ways that organizations can operate within their restrictions, but begin to put philanthropic programs. And by that includes everything from in-kind to corporate investment to private investment to, to all of those things that I would put under the umbrella of philanthropy.
Fundraising, because the philanthropy, I got to look up the word philanthropy. Where it is.
I look at it this way.
Yeah.
Philanthropy is and this is my definition. So this is Jeff Broadus's definition. So you won't find it in Webster's. But philanthropy is that umbrella activity of everything that talks about bringing resources into an organization. I look at fundraising as a part of philanthropy. But I look at philanthropy from relationship building, from stewardship, from all of those other activities that put yourself in a position to successfully raise money. So it's a little bit broader of a concept. And that's where we start with CAP organizations. We've developed a 4 or 5 point plan for getting CAP organizations started on the road to successful fundraising that allows them to operate within their restrictions, but begin to do the kinds of things that other organizations are doing to get started. And part of that's education and training and just understanding that it's possible from people that don't have the highest level of training or experience, because they've been in the CAP world for so long, they just never got it. It's not intentional. It's just, it's just a byproduct of the environment.
Yeah. And the training is so important because I've seen multiple times organizations, CAPs, Head Starts just hire a development director and think, okay, we're good. And that it has never worked that I have seen. I don't know if you've seen it work.
No. It's not cultural.
It's like hiring a financial person. Are you looking for a bookkeeper or a CFO? That's very different. Or a marketing
right? And as you know, Amy, it's cultural. Successful organizations that successfully raise money, it's a cultural thing in their organization.
And this is not just CAPs. I mean, you have entrepreneurs who care about an issue, don't know anything about nonprofits or fundraising, but go for it.
Correct.
And here's the thing about the question about the restrictions. Honestly, I didn't mean to, it wasn't about challenging because I don't know anything about regulation. So it's sometimes for nonprofit leaders, the restrictions are in their own mind, right? Yes. So we can't get started because we don't have anything.
Absolutely.
You're saying, no, we can do a training to kind of get you moving a little bit. And so the help is there. We just have to connect the dots for them.
I think that's a great way of putting it. Yes, there are restrictions that leaders and boards of directors and staff put on themselves because there's that fear. We talked earlier about fearless fundraising.
Yeah.
We oftentimes have to remember that in order to get to be fearless, you have to work through the fear. And I don't know any fundraiser that's never been afraid of fundraising. There are a ton of people that fear that and organizations that do it. Yeah. But yes, there are, for those that are willing and able and want to create change in their organizations, there's a pathway to getting them the resources they need to reduce that fear, eliminate that fear, and then become fearless in their conviction and passion for what it is that they're doing, which makes raising money. I put it this way to people all the time. Would you have any hesitation making a recommendation on where somebody should go to a new restaurant, a new bar, go to a movie? I mean, we sell our friends all the time, right? Hey, I went to this great restaurant. You should go there. We don't feel bad asking people to do that. So if we have that same passion about our organization, then it's as if you're asking somebody,
And that's what strategic planning gives them, right? It gives them that confidence.
Yeah. I was at a conference where there was there was a panel of people in charge of foundations, and they were asked, what was your biggest pet peeve? And this woman jumped out of her chair and said, ask already. I know why you're here. She's like, and she refuses. They have to ask. She's like, I'll go golfing. We'll have dinner. We'll have coffee. They'll give me presentations until they ask.
And what's really funny
Just
is
ask.
just ask, or we have to have a meeting or give tours, or no, you don't. You need to be able to communicate what your strategic plan is and find it the right person. And here's the thing, I know the stress is real on the ground, but what I hear you all saying and what we know to be true after 90 combined years, am I doing the math correctly, is fundraising isn't hard. It's working the plan. You started off, Jeff, saying that. It's having a good, decent plan. It doesn't even have to be a good plan that you stay disciplined with, and then you actually do the asking, because you're wasting everybody's time. And I'll tell you one thing, and I'm feeling a little fiery right now because I'm going to soften it up here because I know it's hard on the front lines. If you can't raise money for food scarcity, that people are hungry and starving, you do not have I promise you, you do not have a fundraising problem. That's like a CPA who can't make money. Like, there are just certain businesses you can put out a sign and say, we need help to solve this problem. And I promise you, it's easier than it feels.
Amy, it doesn't matter if you're raising $50 or $1 million. Every interview I ever sat through for a fundraising job asked me that question about, what was your most successful fundraising? What was your biggest failure? What don't you like about, are you afraid of fundraising? And the answer was no, because to your point, fundraising isn't about the act of asking. I mean, it is, you have to make the ask.
To Kate's point, you have to ask.
But I've always said, if you've done your homework, if you've built your relationship to your donor, whether you're asking for $50, $500, $5,000, or $1 million, the number of zeros on the end is irrelevant if you've built a relationship and you know that your donor cares about your passion. If you don't know, then you need to change the process. You don't have a good plan, because if you're just focused on the dollars and you're not focused on the passions of the donors, that's a problem. And so you can have the best plan, but if you don't work that plan, and if you don't develop those relationships, we talk about innovative ways of fundraising. Text, $18 to 10479 and make your gift, right? And that's great. And we as fundraisers talk all the time about the millennial way of giving or the Gen Z way of giving, and it's different than the old, it's different than the old way of raising money. And at the end of the day, that may be true, but it is all based at some level on the relationship that you connect your organization to that donor, whether it's for a text donation, an online donation, a web-based donation, it doesn't matter. You still have to build that relationship. And I will argue all day, every day, that relationships matter, especially in fundraising.
Absolutely. But it's also about storytelling. We don't tell our stories well enough. Like you said, Amy, there's so many nonprofits could put a sign out, and if people know what's going on, oh my goodness. I was talking with a Head Start, and they send a van to a bridge every morning, weekday morning, because there's a family living under it, and they take the 2 kids to Head Start. I mean, they're clearly helping them, trying to get, remedy the whole situation. And I was like, okay, here, how much do you need? Like, how much do you need? And I mean, I heard so many stories that are just unreal, that if we can really gather our stories and understand and not be scared to get stories, so many of the clients want to tell their stories, some don't. The best training I ever was in was policy council, so it's parents of Head Start students, and they wanted to learn how to fundraise, and it was the most passionate group of people. They wanted to know how to get gift cards from the gas station, how to get this and how to get that, and it was definitely, their idea was of a major gift. They said, we do have a major donor, and it was the gentleman owned a gas station. He gave them 5 gift cards for Slurpees for each of their meetings. But we're scared to really ask these people to help out and to share their story, because we're afraid they just won't want to.
Yeah, and because we don't know our story. We might have the examples of the clients that the message isn't getting out. And I get that. I mean, even in my own business, if I'm being honest, it's hard to keep up getting the messaging out, right?
Of course.
When you're, So I agree with you. It's getting the stories out. And the other part of the story, there's so many conferences on storytelling anymore. We've been around so long. It's like, okay, where are we at now with diversity, equity, inclusion? I mean, God bless it, but we've been working on DEI for 30 years, and now they're calling it a certain, and now all of a sudden the funders have decided that we need to see but it's like this industry's been working on this stuff for don't talk, I'm working with libraries. I'm like, they're the OG of DEI. And you're talking to them like they don't know what they're talking about doing. So our funders do keep us jumping a bit, don't they?
Absolutely.
Well, and we're usually out leading from the front, and they tend to catch up.
And they tend to catch up and take the microphone.
Yeah. Well,
unfortunately, that's the beauty of the power of the money anyway. But we've got the power of the people.
Absolutely.
And I think, Kate, that's part of your point, is with good stories, with a strategic plan where we can also tell the nuts and bolts of what we're doing too, not just the emotive endpoint, but the scalability of what we're doing ultimately, right? The evidence-based components, the fact that we have good financial reports and a functioning board of directors, which is, we're going to have you guys back and we're going to talk.
That's a whole nother conversation.
That would be awesome though. If you guys have some time, even next month, to come back, I'd love to talk about boards, because I think I'm due for a therapy session.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
I'm on my school board. And I'm in the middle of helping a few boards that are trying to set things straight. I will say this. I teach a class in civic and community engagement. I thank you for explaining the philanthropic umbrella. Jeff, that was really very helpful. And, for me, my umbrella is community building, because to me, if everything comes under community building, so different things, of course, but everything I work on. And I think that this conversation has been so helpful. And it just reminds me, my pet project right now, the thing I'm learning the most from is the work I'm doing with my daughter's softball organization. So my book is going to be called The Softball Effect, because, man, everything we're talking about.
I loved your session at the conference because you used that example. I love that.
Story continues.
It'll be a good book.
I think I shared with you, Amy, I sit on the board of a local softball association that my daughters have participated in. I'm a former president, and it's such great work. So I can't wait to read.
It's important work. It's
really important.
But all the things we're talking about at the $100 million level, just smaller.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate your time today and the generosity of your gifts, just your perspective. And to the nonprofit leaders out there, what can you share? How can they learn more about you and your work?
Well, it's been a pleasure to be here and share with you, and we'd love to come back, and our passion is equal to, if not greater than, those that we work with. And so we thank you for giving us an outlet, and for you being as passionate as you are. It's terrific.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to sit and chat with two people that are kind of geeking out about the same thing. It's a great way to spend the morning.
How can folks stay in touch with you? Is there a way to connect with you online, or?
Sure, absolutely. You can go to wipfli.com, WIPFLI.com, and you can find both Kate's information and my information. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you find yourself. And we've got a great conference in Vegas this summer where we're going to train on all of these things with more than 1,000 people in attendance. So you can find out more information.
70 plus sessions, I think, on all sorts of things nonprofit.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. And I just posted the site. Of course, it's in the comments as well. Check out these fantastic, fearless fundraisers and leaders. Thanks for being with us today. And yes, let's have you back and let's talk boards.
Love it. Love it.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
Talk to you soon. Thanks.
Okay.
Yes.